All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Matt Puglisi. I'm the director of the Community Investment Fund, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Sam Brill. He's a senior economic development advisor with DECD, and Sam's been instrumental in helping us get the Community Investment Fund 2030 program off the ground and into operation, and he'll be assisting us with our Q&A. So just want to start off for anybody that was here last week. This is the same webinar material as it was last week. In case you attended, there won't be anything new. We'll just answer Q&A as we get to them at the end. We will be answering questions. We're going to do our best to get to as many as we can. We're going to limit this to an hour, and with the new program, there may be many questions we can't necessarily address, but we will be providing an FAQ document shortly on the CIF website. And so we'll be, if we don't get to your question today, please look for it to be addressed in the FAQ document. So the Community Investment Fund is
I'm sorry, Matt, just one more thing before we start with questions. We are going to, so on the website right now is posted a video of the last one of these webinars. So all of the slides are there. The PowerPoint itself, Matt, I think we will make available on the website as well. So I don't know that we're necessarily going to send it to every attendee, but we will post it on the website so that everyone has access to it. And in terms of other questions that folks have, I would just encourage people to not jump in with questions right now. Maybe wait till Matt, goes through some things because he might answer your question. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Sam. Very helpful. So just a warning to everybody, the webinar is being recorded. We will post this as well because we imagine we're going to get some different questions, and that could be helpful, or hearing the answer a second time in the recording will be helpful for you all. So the Community Investment Fund 2030, it's new program. It came out of the 2021 legislative session was created by statute. And this is very different than other DECD programs. The Community Investment Fund has a board of directors. The board consists of approximately 21 members of state government. And it is co-chaired by Speaker Matthew Ritter and Senate President Martin Looney, and has leadership from both the executive branch and from the legislative branch. The CIF Board of Directors is ultimately the group that is going to decision applications. We'll get into that. DECD's role in this is to administer the program. We will be administering the process. And in a lot of ways, think of myself as the concierge for all of you as applicants as you navigate this process. The program is a 5-year program, and we're looking to make this consistent. We're trying to set this up and establish it so we're all used to what this process is going to be over the course of 5 years. We're going to be talking about this initial application process, but we're really looking at most of what we put together here to be, the way it's going to be moving forward. We'll probably tweak things to, make it better, make it easier for everybody in terms of operationalizing it. But, going to try to make it fairly regular with 2 application opportunities during the course of the year. And the length and runway of this, 5 years, twice a year being able to apply, allows you as communities, as organizations to think about what you want to do long term, not just what you're going to do in this initial application. So if you don't have a project or you don't feel that you're ready to bring something to the table now, you have time to think about it. So, approach this session from that point of view as well. And let's see, let's dive in here. So, what we're going to do today is go through the program eligibility, the project categories, the statutory priorities, and the application process. And again, I know we're going to have a lot of questions, and I'd like to ask you to please, hold off until we get into the meat and potatoes of the presentation a little bit more, and then use the Q&A function to submit those. And we will not get to every question that we get asked. We didn't last week, but we will be updating an FAQ document on the CIF website that you'll be able to view. And you can also send questions via email to us at any time. That address is communityinvestmentfund@ct.gov. So another piece that's really important for you all to be aware of, a goal of this program and the way that we're running it is to be very transparent. So you can view the CIF policy and guideline documents, the board meetings, the minutes, that's all available on the website and can be very helpful to understanding the program. It's all on the application page of the website. So let's start looking at eligible applicants. So there are 3 categories of eligible applicants. So municipalities are eligible, and there is a list of the 54 municipalities on the CIF website. All of those municipalities received invitations to attend and notification of their eligibility. These are public investment communities and alliance school districts. So a couple of questions that we have received around this is there is no difference in terms of priority if you're a public investment community or if you're an alliance district. We're just asking you to indicate that on the application. Additionally, for the 5-year period now, if you are here as an eligible municipality, whether it's PIC or alliance, and your community drops off of the list during this 5-year period, you're going to be grandfathered in for this 5-year period and allowed to continue to submit future application periods. So the other 2 eligible applicants are community development corporations and nonprofit organizations that serve eligible municipalities. So if you are a CDC or a nonprofit that is not located in an eligible municipality, but you serve the eligible municipality, you are able to apply. You'll just have to be very clear how the community investment fund dollars are going only to the eligible municipality. Joint applications are allowed, whether that's between 2 eligible communities or eligible nonprofit and CDC or community, any kind of structure of that, but all of the applicants would need to be eligible. And so to be clear, if you have a eligible municipality that wants to apply for a project with a neighboring municipality that is not eligible, then that would not be an eligible application. And, again, all of this information is in the policy and the guideline document that is available on the CIF website. So now we will look at the other half, eligible projects. So once you're one of these eligible applicants, the municipality, the CDC, the nonprofit, the project that you propose must promote economic or community development in the municipality where the project's located. And then 2, and I'm going to read the state statute here, such project or grant and aid furthers consistent, systematic, fair, just, and impartial treatment of all individuals, including individuals who belong to underserved and marginalized communities that have been denied such treatment, such as Black, Latino, and Indigenous and Native American persons, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, and other persons of color, members of religious minorities, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer persons, and other persons compromising the LGBTQ+ community, persons who live in rural areas, and persons otherwise adversely affected by persistent poverty or inequality. And again, that is the statutory language. We at DECD did not create that, so those are the target populations that the program is looking to serve. So now we'll look at the types of project categories. So there's two big buckets: capital improvements and small business support programs. So an eligible project means a project that's proposed by a municipality, community development corporation, or nonprofit organization for the purpose of promoting economic or community development in the municipality or a municipality served by such a corporation or organization, such as brownfield remediation, affordable housing, establishment of or improvements to water and sewer infrastructure to support smaller scale development, pedestrian safety, traffic calming improvements, establishment of or improvements to energy resiliency or clean energy projects, land acquisition, capital projects to construct, rehabilitate, or renovate buildings and structures to facilitate home rehabilitation programs, and public facilities such as libraries and senior centers. So both construction of new facilities is allowed, acquisition of a building or acquisition of land for a building would be allowable, renovation of a facility, in addition to a facility, those would all be allowable. Just want to address in advance a lot of the questions that we've received in the past. So on the other side, the small business support program. So this is a program, it's not direct small business support. So if you're a small business looking for a loan or looking for startup funds, you're going to want to be talking to your municipality or a nonprofit or CDC in your municipality, if you're eligible, about creating such a program. So the municipality, the CDC, or the nonprofit can establish a program, whether that's a revolving loan program, microloans, gap financing to small businesses located within the municipality, or startup funds to establish a small business in any such municipality. So that could be startup funds that's provided by a program. So there's not direct small business lending going on by DECD through the Community Investment Fund program. Sam, am I missing something on that I'm not making clear? Okay, just want to make sure. So the other piece that's really important, there is a minimum of $250,000 in your proposal for CIF funding. There is no limit to the request. So think big. What you're going to want to do is provide the full vision for your program, for your project, I should say. Partial funding is possible. So if it's a multi-phase project, provide what the vision is. You want to help the board understand where it is that you're trying to get. And if you have the detailed work done already that you know what phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 of the project look like, you can break that down in the budget and in your narrative so that the board can understand that. For organizations and communities that are early on in their process, there's an opportunity to explain where you are in your process. You know, it's a goal of the Community Investment Fund to bring different organizations, to bring different applicants to the table and make sure that they have the opportunity to bring community investment funds to their community. So please reach out, schedule a one-on-one conversation with me, and let's start to think, whether it's in this application period or a future one, how you can start to move forward with an application. We want to be as helpful as possible to you, but there is that opportunity for partial funding. For a small business support program, the statute requires that any proposed loan or financing must utilize an interest rate that does not vary from the prevailing market rate. So whatever you're going to be proposing, you want to demonstrate that your rate is consistent with similar programs.
We have a really good question that just came in on the Q&A.
Great.
That actually Matt and I were just talking about yesterday, which is, can an applicant provide grants, not loans, but grants that would not be repaid to an existing business? So in looking at the statute, unfortunately, that's not an allowable project because it's not an eligible project because the statute allows for grants to establish a small business. So in other words, a business that does not already exist, the statute allows for startup funds to establish that business. It does not allow for straight grants to existing businesses. There would have to be some form of loan or financing that is repaid. So that's the way that the statute reads now.
That's great. Thank you very much for that clarification, Sam. So going from statutory language within the statute for the Community Investment Fund, there are 4 statutory priorities. And you're going to have the opportunity to indicate on your application if you have any of these priorities as part of your project. You do not need to have all of them to receive priority. And part of my role as administrator will be to flag applications with these priorities and clearly communicate that to the Community Investment Fund Board. So the first is that the application includes a project labor agreement or another employment proposal to employ ex-offenders or individuals with physical, intellectual, or developmental disabilities. The municipality has implemented local hiring preferences pursuant to Section 7-112 of the General Statutes. The third is that the applicant has or will leverage municipal, private, philanthropic, or federal funds for such a project. So you'll notice there's no state line there. So if you have another state grant or if you have tax credits from a quasi-state agency, that will not trigger the leveraging other fund priority. And then the fourth is that the application includes a letter of support from one or more members of the General Assembly in whose district the project will be located. So on that point, just want to make clear that if you're a CDC or a nonprofit, it does not state that you need to have a letter from the mayor or first select person or the town council. That is something that you can still attach, but a letter from the mayor or first select person will not trigger this priority. It's specifically from the General Assembly member. And it doesn't matter if it is from your representative or from your state senator. There's not a priority to one or the other. Just want to be clear on that. So then the other role that DECD was going to be looking at in your applications is highlighting applications that align with the state's economic action plan. That is linked on the Community Investment Fund website, and you can go through that. Again, this program is different from other grant programs that DECD runs. The Community Investment Fund Board of Directors are going to be making the decision on which grants to recommend to the governor for funding. And I'm going to be going through those steps. DECD as the administrator is going to be reviewing programs for eligibility, everything that we went over, and then highlighting those statutory priorities, as well as applications that align with the state's economic action plan. And these 4 pillars are workforce, communities, innovation, and business environment. And then DECD will also look for programs that follow DECD best practices and represent an efficient use of taxpayer funds. So what does that mean? Projects that are shovel ready, projects that are leveraging funding, a realistic and comprehensive budget, limiting soft costs, and a realistic and comprehensive project plan. For municipalities, in accordance with the Connecticut General Statute 8-23 and amended by Public Act 15-95, any municipality that has not adopted a plan of conservation and development within the past 10 years is ineligible for discretionary state funding unless you request and receive a waiver from this prohibition by the OPM secretary. So municipalities will need to submit a municipal certification of eligibility for discretionary state funding. That's, again, something that we link in the application and on the website. Projects may require additional review under the Connecticut Environmental Policy Act. For capital projects that involve federal funding, the project will need to be in compliance with Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act and the National Environmental Policy Act. If the project is successful in receiving the grant, it will have to be in compliance with the Connecticut Environmental Policy Act, and there is additional information that you'll be able to review on the State Historic Preservation Office website. For small business support programs, the statute requires that certain factors be taken into consideration by the CIF board. The board is required to consider certain factors, and that is the risk of default on payment of proposed loans and financing, the impact on job creation or retention, the impact on blighted properties, and the overall impact on the community. And then DECD will assess proposals to make sure that they align with small business financing best practices. And per the statute, financing programs that vary from the prevailing market rate shall not be recommended for funding. So an example of prevailing market rate would be the Connecticut Small Business Boost Program, which DECD will be rolling out in the next month or so. But otherwise, documentation, if you're already an organization that is doing small business lending, a program, in alignment with this, documenting your practices, your rates, how you determine those rates, and how they are in line with the prevailing market rate terms is what you'll have to communicate clearly. So now we'll walk through what the review process is going to look like. And again, DECD is going to be reviewing and assessing eligibility and alignment with everything that we've talked about. DECD, myself, the CIF team, is not going to score these applications. This is very different than what many organizations and communities have come to us with questions about over the last several weeks. There's no rubric. There's no weight that one thing weighs more than another. So eligible applicants, you're going to submit through the CIF website. Right now on the website, you can click on the button for application preview. That will give you a PDF that has all of the application questions and indicates everything where additional attachments are allowable and what types of attachments you might need to be working on preparing. You cannot submit yet through the CIF website. We're trying to get that portal up, and I will send an email out to notify everybody that has attended these webinars once that portal is open. Once the applications come in, DECD will review everything, and we will communicate with anybody who is ineligible. We will notify you, and then eligible applications are going to be summarized by DECD, noted for their statutory priorities, their alignment with best practices in the state's economic action plan, and then forwarded to the CIF board. The CIF board will review the applications, vote on recommendations, and then forward those recommendations to the governor. The governor then reviews the recommended applications and issues their final recommendations and directs those to the State Bond Commission. The governor needs to provide reasons per the statute that he is not recommending something for funding, and then make the recommendations to the State Bond Commission for those that are going forward from funding in 2 months' time. And then the State Bond Commission ultimately will meet and issue approvals for projects. So we can look at the timeline that we have right now. So we posted the notice of funding availability in the application on May 23rd, and the deadline to submit an application is July 25th at midnight. Then over the next 2 months, DECD will be in the review process and be communicating with the CIF board. The CIF board will meet to review and recommend applications on September 27th. Then these will be turned to the governor. who will review and issue their final recommendations. The State Bond Commission will then meet to issue and make final approvals. Want to make clear here as you're thinking about this, within the timeline, there's no grant. It's oftentimes that there's a required start date. A project can't start, up to a certain time. We don't have that. Same with the project period at the moment. That's going to be determined, the types of projects that are funded through CIF. There's going to be such a range that's going to be determined project by project when they're successfully funded. Then we will be developing an agreement between DECD and the recipient, and that will outline what the timeline is and any milestones in the project. You can submit more than one application. So whether a municipality wants to submit multiple applications or a nonprofit or a CDC, there is no limitation to multiple applications being funded for the same community in one project period. So, just want to make that clear. You can also come back to the Community Investment Fund in future rounds for additional funding or for the same project if it isn't funded, provided that you've addressed any concerns that were communicated on that initial application. So right now, there's several documents that are available on the website, and I encourage you to look at the Community Investment Fund Policy and Guidelines document that was adopted by the board. Look at the Notice of Funding Availability, look at the application, and also look at the application instructions. Provide some really helpful tips in advance, and a lot of the questions that we've received can be answered in those documents. We will continue to work to update FAQs over the next several weeks as we get good questions that need to be clarified. And again, please submit any questions via email to communityinvestmentfund@ct.gov. We will send notification when the application submission portal is open, but please, no paper or hard copies are going to be accepted. Please do not email applications or attachments directly to me. There's going to be several attachments that are required and allowed. Because of, again, the diverse amount of entities and types of projects, there's not going to be any kind of asterisks on attachments where you have to do it. You're going to have to keep track of that yourself for your type of organization, your type of project, to make sure that you have everything that is required. Bulk, well, don't want to speak too much about the uploading process at the moment until we get some of these things clarified. In your application itself, though, there are no word or character limits to narrative question responses. We want responses to be thorough. Not trying to make that harder for you, but please answer the questions thoroughly. In terms of attachments, please keep everything to basic file formats. So JPEGs, PDFs, Word documents, Excel documents. Please don't submit CAD files or anything that is not there. And again, this is outlined in the application instructions. And so I think now we have time to switch over to the questions. You can type those into the Q&A module. And again, the email option is there. And you can also schedule a one-on-one 30-minute conversation with myself. You can do this through the website. So Sam, can I turn it over to you to see what kind of questions we have? Kick things off?
Yeah, so already a bunch of good questions. Some of the questions that were very simple, I just answered typing in answers. So a few questions. One question has to do with whether a project would be eligible if it is a lending program in order to facilitate affordable housing in an eligible community? It's a really good question. It's one that I'd like to actually talk more with Matt about, and I'll talk with other folks internally at DECD about, to understand our limitations on whether that is a type of project that we could fund. So I think Carla, while asked that question, I'd like to get back to her about that, because it's a good question. It doesn't fit super neatly into one of the categories, but it's in the spirit of the law, and so I'd like to figure out a good answer. We had a question on whether a private developer can apply with or on behalf of a municipality. So a private developer is not an eligible applicant. The municipality can apply, but the municipality has to be the applicant, or a not-for-profit or a CDC has to be the applicant. Obviously, if a developer is providing private matching funds, that's great, but that developer cannot be the applicant and cannot be the entity that receives funding from the state. There was a question about project labor agreement, how it's weighted. So just generally, all the different categories of priority that Matt went through, there is no formula for how they're going to be weighted or scored. We will just note to the board that this application should receive priority, and it's up to the board to decide essentially how much priority. But that's all the statute really says. So in other words, it's up to the board. And there's a question of the 4 priority categories, do we have to meet a minimum number of them? No, you in fact don't have to meet any of the priority categories. It's just that'll be something we note in the application that the board has to take into consideration when it's voting to approve applications. And then the other question, the project labor agreement, can it be contingent on CIF funding? Yes, that's fine. We wouldn't require that there be a project labor agreement even without CIF funding, so that's fine. Question, shifting gears, will funds be dispersed as reimbursements, or will they essentially be supplied upfront? I don't know, Matt, if you've had conversations with folks about that. It's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it is a good question. This is one of those that's going to be different project to project. There's not a one-size-fits-all answer to that question. So in terms of how funding will go, that will be assessed based on DECD's review of the project, the risk that's involved, the scope of the project. So, that'll be something that is worked out in the contractual agreement.
Is there a limit on the size of the application document? No. So I think what you'll see is that there's a fillable PDF form that you'll complete. And then there are a bunch of attachments that we'll ask you to do depending on your project. You may have 10 or 15 attachments. You may only have a couple of attachments. It depends on your project. So I think you'll see on the website there are pretty, we hope, clear directions on exactly what's needed. So what you should not do is just send a document to our inbox. That's not the application. There will be a fillable PDF. That's the form you should use along with the application, along with the attachments that we're going to require. Definition of a community development corporation. That's a great question. There's actually just a law passed this session to define a community development corporation and establish a process for DECD to approve community development corporations. That is going to be implemented in the future over the next year or so. For now, a community development corporation is a not-for-profit entity that does community development work. It's a very loose definition, so it's not a defined term. The key is it has to be a not-for-profit, and for this program, it has to operate in one of the eligible municipalities. So anything, Matt, I missed?
No, I don't think anything else to add there at the moment. There is one question talking about accomplishment reporting requirements. That is again going to be a little bit different project to project, but traditionally DECD has required semi-annual reporting on use of funds. So it's going to be different if you have a capital project that is completed within 18 months or a capital project that takes 3 years to complete, or if you have a revolving loan program that's going on over many, many years. And we'll outline that in the agreement if you're awarded a fund. But that is something to take into account in terms of there will be some level of reporting requirements and administrative work on the recipient.
So let's see, there are a few questions. There's a question about a municipal land bank, and we've also heard from a potential applicant on a housing trust. So our feeling is that that is an eligible project to establish a land bank or a housing trust, but we would really encourage you to work with us on your application to make it as specific as possible. So, I think what we would be looking for when we look at applications and best practices, and what the board will be looking for, are really proposals that are as concrete as possible. So not just, we want a bunch of money because in the future we're going to buy some distressed properties and eventually redevelop them. We'd really want to see, here is the universe of properties that we would look to acquire and redevelop. Here are our goals for redevelopment. Here are the partners we would work with. Here are the communities where it would be happening. So I guess the short answer, Kevin Alvarez is the person who asked the question. Short answer is yes, but the more specific you are in your application, the more likely it, I think, will be to be approved. And I know that if Melinda Wilson is still on from sector, that answers the question she raised to me as well. So,
Sam, can I jump in on one here? Because we've had a lot of questions like this. So if a nonprofit applies to renovate space for programming, will this grant allow for program implementation costs once the space is renovated for use? So the capital project bucket here for Community Investment Fund is a capital project funding program. So whether that's building new space or renovating existing space, that's where the funds are dedicated. It is that can go towards building out and outfitting the space, but it is not for operational costs for staff for ongoing use. So I hope that is clear. But that again, with anything that is, this isn't a programmatic operational funding program.
Yeah. There's a question, just jumping ahead, but I'd meant to mention before, when we expect to release the next round of funding. The answer is November. So that's when we expect to start this process over again, open up applications. There'd be, roughly 2 months for applications to come in, and then, a couple months after that, things would be approved. So we expect going forward that that there'll be one round released, in May, June, another round released in November, December, every year for the next 5 years.
So there's a question about, I'm not sure I necessarily understand it, asked about flexibility, but there is up to 75 million in funds that are available in this cycle. The legislation authorizes up to 175 million per year and does account for funds that are not spent in a year and allowing for those to roll over. If a new project is being started by an existing organization, can form, so if new projects in terms of capital projects or a new revolving loan program or small business financing program, new startups and projects and expansions on projects or can be funded. So, maybe send your email to us, send an email to us, Suzanne, and we try to get a better answer to that question. But we are looking at 2 rounds of funding, and if you apply in this round and you're not funded, we will, if there's any feedback as to how to improve your application, we'll give you that, and if you address that, you can submit for a future round.
There are a couple of questions about what we would call soft costs for a capital project. So money to hire an architect or grant writer, or there's a question just came in about staffing expenses. So that may be allowed as some relatively small percentage of the overall award, but that can't be the primary proposal that is coming in to us. So, if you're proposing a capital project, those soft costs could be, 5 or 10, maybe 15% at the high end of your overall budget, but that's not the purpose of this program, to fund soft costs and staffing. So we've gotten the question a couple of times about other entities that may or may not be eligible, housing authorities or councils of government. I think, again, Matt, we should circle back to those folks because I think it's a good question we don't have an answer to at this moment. But we want to get an answer for sure on those 2. So we will get back to you and also post the answer on the FAQ section of our website.
Yes. But, I will build off that, Sam. And so 501c3 nonprofit, but any nonprofit organization, 501c6, 501c7, if you're not for-profit organization, you're eligible to apply.
Question about if the funding is approved, how is it paid out? Again, it really will vary project to project on whether it's, how much is upfront, how much is reimbursable, how many different stages of funding there may be. It's going to be on a project by project basis for sure. Someone asked, were we saying that only municipalities can apply for funding for low-income housing? No. There are 3 eligible categories of applicants: municipalities, not-for-profit organizations, and community development corporations. Any of those would be eligible to apply for a project related to affordable housing. There can be for-profit partners in an application, and leveraging private dollars is a category that would get you priority, but the funds have to flow to an eligible applicant, and a for-profit developer is not an eligible applicant.
So there's a question about funds being used for new construction of a homeless shelter and rehab to an existing one. So I want to kind of build off that because there's not really enough information here to say, yeah, 100% yes or 100% no. So they're capital projects in the eligible community. So if you're a nonprofit organization, a municipality in the eligible community, and you're proposing a capital project program, you're ticking off a lot of boxes that say yes. But then the other really key piece is, how does this project address the need for the target population? So it's not just we need to replace the roof or we need to build a new facility, but you need to make sure that you're connecting back to the target population. And there's several questions that allow you to expand on identification of that population, identification of the economic or community challenge that's facing them in your community, how they're involved in development of the solution and what the solution is, and what success is for fixing this problem in your community.
Lucy Diaz's question, can funds be used to support a housing rehab program that provides forgivable loans to homeowners to make needed improvements on their residence? I pretty clearly see that as one of the categories of eligible projects. The statute allows for let's see, capital projects to construct, rehabilitate, or renovate buildings and structures to facilitate or improve home rehabilitation programs. So that seems pretty clearly eligible. Again, you just would need to make sure that everything, all the other eligibility criteria are met, that it's in a municipality that is eligible and that the applicant is an eligible applicant, but otherwise, yes.
So there's a good question here in terms of budget and how you position your request. So the question says, hypothetically, if a project is $5 million, do you recommend one ask for $5 million or $1 million each year? And my recommendation is that you come with the $5 million request. If it is a 5-phase project and each phase is $1 million, put that into the narrative, explain where you are in that process, but bring the board the full project. Help them understand what the full vision is and the funding that's required to get there. Because there's no reason to kind of burden yourself at going through the same application project $1 million at a time.
And I think possibly the last question is, so this question is specifically about a capital project for a school-linked medical clinic that's operated by a not-for-profit serving community members. So the answer is yes, that's definitely an eligible capital project. The broader question is what sorts of facilities can be built or renovated or improved using CIF funds. And the guidance that we've given has been that it needs to be a public facility, meaning any building which has a substantially public purpose and is open to the public quite often throughout the year. So obviously this project wouldn't meet that criteria. So it doesn't need to be owned by a municipality or owned by the state. It just needs to serve a public purpose and be open to the public.
So we have a question that is about a not-for-profit organization that works, partners with small businesses. And the question, Jacqueline, that you're asking is really a programmatic funding question. So the small business category is really to create a lending tool where the majority of the CIF funds are creating the principal for a fund that is lending out, providing some level of financing, not covering staff time and programmatic costs.
AMI eligibility requirements. So, for an affordable housing project, are there requirements regarding area median income? The answer is no, there's not a hard and fast requirement, but obviously, a project which has lower AMI and, generally is a project which is geared toward affordability and toward low income folks is going to be received more favorably by the board. So. Let's see.
So there's a question about soft costs and if the rate that's included is not covered in their entirety, can in-kind contribution count towards the leveraged funds resources? And that's one that I just want to circle back
Yeah,
on?
I would say every other DECD project I've worked on, the answer to that has been no. That an in-kind contribution of a professional's time does not count as match. So I would tend toward no. We can get a final answer, but I would tend toward no.
It looks otherwise that we have hit all of the questions that are in the queue. Thank you, everybody, for the great questions. If you have more, Community Investment Fund at ct.gov. The Community Investment Fund website, I will just click back, is up here in the banner at the top. It is portal.ct.gov/community investment fund. We have a recording of last week's webinar up there if you need to go and listen to anything that we said again. You can sign up for one-on-one consultation through the website. And again, the way that I define my role with the Community Investment Fund in terms of how I'm working with you as applicants is that it's not my job to review them and score them. It's my job to bring good applications to the Community Investment Fund board. So I want to help you be successful and put your best foot forward with these applications. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me. We have recorded this webinar and it will be posted. Just give us a little bit of time to make sure that we can get it captioned and updated. With that, thank you very much, everybody. And we look forward to seeing your applications. Have a great day.